Guys, this is Jeremy from 78 Productions. I wanted to introduce to you guys Meredith Gould, who, let me just say, is a breath of fresh air in the conversation of what social media and the gospel means, because there's all this talk about how do you use tools well, what are the best ways to engage people, how do you come up with this strategy that maybe will get me more people to follow us on Facebook, and yet as I try to preach, Meredith, I think you do an even better job just talking about what it means to be able to use social media well. Introduce us to yourself and maybe where people can find you online.
Well, you can find me everywhere online. Actually, I don't even exist in real life. So drug of preference is Twitter, at Meredith Gould on Twitter. Facebook, you can connect with me on Facebook, although I'm Facebook. Pinterest, other little happy place. Instagram, started out as an artist, so that's a very happy place for me. So if you love visuals and you take great pictures, I would love to connect with you there. I have a website, and I have a personal blog. If you go to my website, you'll get all the connectors there.
And we'll make sure that we have all those links as well. Just
okay.
Click those so you don't have to spell them out. So
okay, great.
Our conversation today is how to integrate social media with the gospel, and for a lot of people, I think that's, well, you just write down what you preached on, and that's all you have to do. But I think that you would probably push a different model in how to do this. Going through your book, I noticed that you had an entire section of social media theology, and it's all in the same place. Why is it that you did that?
Yeah, well, the chapter on thinking theologically is in the first section, and in the first section of the book you'll see that I have in there all the big framework questions. So that's also the section that has thinking sociologically. It has a section on learning theory, learning styles, on personality theory, and all that. And that section is called Frameworks for Understanding, because after years of being involved with church communications, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to start with an understanding about communications. Who do you want to reach? Who's receiving the communications? How do they receive communications? What media works well and why for different people? And so that is a much broader understanding than just saying, whoa, I love Twitter, everybody should love Twitter. So thinking theologically is in there because as ministers of the Word, quite literally, we also need to look at our church communications through the God lens. And actually the person who gave me that phrase is Joe Smith, who's on Twitter as Your Average Pastor, because his name is Joe Smith. And he's a pastor out near Seattle. Has become a dear friend through social media. And I was in a conversation with him, and I said, so when you think about this theologically, and most people start with, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and everybody starts reciting John. I said, okay, once we get past that, what does it mean to think theologically? And he's the one who said, well, I think it means let's look at everything through the God lens. So it's in that thinking theologically section is in that first section of the book, because it's a framework. How do you think? How do you see the world through the God lens? Then how do you use and choose and use media as a person of faith, wanting to support faith? Being a minister, doing ministry, being church, doing church. So that's why it's all there.
Well, and from my own perception of this is that even though we love to be able to use social media to get people into a church, the reality is a lot of times we're ministering to people even on social media as we're initially engaging with people, and the reality is any other ministry would do the same thing. So social media communication, you even have said communication should be a ministry in and of itself. We need to make sure that we're communicating that well, and I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah, let me just add, one of my major memes, I've got a couple of personal memes I'm going on about it all the time. One of them is virtual community is real community, and I have a chapter called that in that first section, that framework section, because I spend a lot of time, especially for people who don't understand social media, think digital ministry is evil, alienating, blah, 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 all that stuff. And when I say to them, no, whatever you do in so-called real life, whatever happens in so-called real life happens online. It just happens at a different velocity. So in the world of ministry, you spend enough time online, regardless of social media platform, and if you are committed to ministering to people, you'll be able to discern when people are in pain, when people are snarky, and when people are acting out. When I look at that, except unless I'm the one being snarky, when I look at that, one of the questions I ask from a pastoral perspective is that person in pain? What is hurting? What isn't working? What are the frustrations? What are the disappointments? And minister to that. Okay? And I use that for my own stuff. When I start getting really snarky and edgy, I have go-to people on social media. I have other pastors. I have a couple pastor friends who will pick up the phone and call me and say, a couple of weird tweets from you. You okay? What's going on? So those of us who use social media for ministry understand that there needs to be, it's not either or, it's both and there needs to be a seamless moving between the two. It's just a tool, folks. So
yeah.
That's my speech.
And this is a great transition in the sense of you were talking about community and how to do that well. And so I've come to know you as the, tell me if I say this wrong, the Chisakam?
Chisakam, yeah.
Yeah. And so there's this entire approach to be able to use Twitter in a way that's, Twitter in and of itself is almost a tool for great marketing. But using it in a way that we can use a tweet chat creates community and actually establishes great networking abilities.
Right.
It helps you to be able to minister to other people. Explain a little bit about what that is and maybe why someone would want to actually use it.
Well, it's interesting that you say Twitter's great for marketing because years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, Twitter was all about communicating and community and conversation. It's only been in the past year or two that it's gotten very that the curated content is almost all marketing and self-promotion and promoting others. So people who are relatively new to Twitter, and I mean like in the past year or two, think, oh, this is just spam. But those of us who've been on it for 5 or 6 years are like, oh, the good old days of Twitter. Now, the Chisakam chat is very interesting. I started that 2 years ago, July 2011, because I saw that there was this void, there was this place where people who were interested in using social media for church, for ministry, to be church beyond the building, needed a place to gather. And so having participated in other tweet chats, I knew that that was a great technological approach. So tweet chats in general, just in general, they're really great because they allow visitors and participants to have access to a steady stream of thoughts and opinions and tips, in addition to providing opportunities for connecting with people who have the same interests, the same passions. They're very much learning communities. The ones that work well are usually, they meet on a weekly basis, usually for an hour. There are 1 or 2 that last for a couple hours, but an hour. They're moderated chats. The moderator chooses 3 to 5 topics and then guides that chat. The thing that's unique, I think, about the Chisakam chat, and this was very purposeful, 2 things. One is I was determined that I'm starting it, we're going to do it my way, and my way was to do it ecumenically. So from the get-go, it was opened across denominations, and even across factions within denominations. And the unifying thing is not, people don't get into doctrinal arguments or, what does this really mean and who really said this and is this true? None of that happens. It's all about how to use the tools to be into church. The other thing that I think has really shaped the quality and the content of the conversation, mostly the quality of the conversation, and I've had people tell me this, so it's not just me making it up, is that going on the everything that happens in real life happens online, is that chat always opens with prayer and it always closes with prayer. And just as you would when you meet at a church, hopefully you open a meeting with prayer, you gather in, you thank God, you thank one another for your presence, you praise, you're grateful, you ask for the guidance and presence of the Holy Spirit. And we do that, that's how we open every chat. At the end, coming out of the tradition I like the Liturgy of the Hours. I was very involved with the Virtual Abbey on Twitter for many years, and so I always end with, and so do the other moderators, we end with one of the prayers from Compline, which is night prayer in the Benedictine tradition. And so what that's done is it gives us these bookends of prayer, and it's always reminding us that we are a community of faith. We happen to be focused on this technical, practical thing, but we are a community of faith. So that's been very cool. And it's turned into a community. I mean, people do connect in between chats. The Chisagam hashtag, I claim bragging rights to that because I invented that. And within 6 months, I would say 4 or 6 months, that became the standard, universally recognized hashtag for tagging content and conversation having to do with church social media across social media. So you'll see that hashtag used on Google+, you'll see it in Facebook, you'll see it elsewhere. And we don't have time for it, but there's a very funny story about how I chose that, how that hashtag ended up being. But so I'm very happy about that, and it's a great community. We have our trolls. Trolls show up. I'm a community manager, and I let the community handle that, quite frankly. During any given chat that I'm moderating, I get direct messages from people with, make that person stop, why is she doing that? All the kind of same stuff you'd get in real life, after the meeting somebody says, why did you let so-and-so, that kind of stuff. It goes on online, and my response is, you handle it. You're part of this community. You handle it. You talk to that person. And if that doesn't work out, then mommy will help. But otherwise, you handle it. So it's a very self-moderating community. I also decided early on that I did not want to be the only moderator. So I really looked to see who really knew their social media stuff, who were also very skilled in online moderation, because it is a skill set, and if they didn't have it, who was willing to learn how to do it. So just a little bit of training, but we now have about 6 or 7 people. I use Doodle, actually, to schedule it, and so I'm not in charge, and I'm happy about that. It's community, and the best example, I think, is this past week. This past Tuesday, I actually did not schedule a formal chat for this Tuesday night. It's on Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And I didn't schedule one because it was so close to Labor Day and school starting, and Rosh Hashanah, and all this other stuff. It's a crazy week. But I did put up tweets saying, we'll have open mic. If you just want to gather anyway, feel free. And then I didn't set it up as a test. This wasn't a trick. I went on at 9 o'clock, as I normally do, and I watched this community begin a chat, open with prayer. Open with prayer. Continue the conversation. And I was literally sitting at my desk crying, just little tears, little weepy thing, because I said to my husband, this community has become self-sourcing. This is a self-sourcing community. I could drop dead tomorrow, and this community will be fine. That's what any community manager should want. So I'm a happy camper. That's Chisagam. Join us.
Very cool. And for someone that's thinking theologically as far as ministry and trying to engage with social media, it's a great tool to be able to use, but even just in this conversation I've heard compassion, community, worship, just being able to have discipleship, evangelism, it's so possible, but you have to have the mindset. And really for me, that's the thing that kind of goes into all of this when we use social media.
Right.
What's the purpose of all this? And if anybody follows you for even a week or two, just to understand how much you integrate that into your social media, it's so necessary.
Yeah. The people who do not do well on the Chisakam chat, it's very interesting because we've had people show up, participate, sort of, and then disappear. And the people who do not actively contribute to community in an I hate to use, it's become a buzzword, authentic, but people who show up with an agenda do not do well in this community. We have in the Chisakam community both people who attend the chat and then people who use the hashtag throughout the week. We're international. We've had people from New Zealand show up for the chat, England show up for the chat, Canada. And most of those people, we have some very, very highly skilled, experienced, competent people. The ones who are the most successful are not the ones getting on saying, look at me, follow my blog, read my blog, blah, 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 you know, hire me, hire me. People who do that do not do well with this chat. And we have a disclaimer I wrote in. We do have a script that moderators get, and again, it's a best practice that most chats have. We have a disclaimer about do not, please use direct message to promote. Do not promote your own services, and many of us are consultants, many of us have books, many of us have workshops. That's not the time to promote that. We're here to support one another. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see how it ebbs and flows.
Cool.
Yeah, very.
I am going to wrap this up.
Okay.
But for people that are online, what are some things that you have online that you maybe want to share? I know definitely plug your book, but we're going to have a link for that as well. How can people, or what is one thing somebody should check out that you're using online?
That I'm using online? Okay, my two favorite things are currently Feedly, which replaced Google Reader. I love it. It's a great interface. You can configure it. I have it configured in a way that works with my brain, and I zip through tons of stuff on Feedly. I love it. The other thing I love that I recommend to a lot of people involved with church social media is to follow Social Media Today. It's a secular it's a secular company. I belong to the Social Media Today group on LinkedIn. I also follow their account on Twitter. I highly recommend it. They have fabulous free webinars. And what I say to church people, my colleagues in church communication, is just replace whatever industry they're talking about with the word church or pastor. Just think laterally, do simultaneous translation, and you will get, because they're at a level, the secular world of social media is so far beyond what a lot of us in social media, in church social media are doing, that I routinely say to people, see what the secular experts are doing, then translate it for church.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for meeting with us, and I definitely would love to ask, what do you guys think as far as social media? How do you integrate it into your ministry? What are some great practices that you have? Even what are some questions for Meredith? We talked about so much stuff, how to integrate theology into everything and to be able to do that well. So what are some questions you guys have that we can pass along? We'll talk to you guys next week.